Hey guys, here today with another Shurogrov knife video. Today we have in front of us a Stellar. Now this is a custom Stellar that was done by Sergey for CCKS SoCal that took place around the end of May this year. And funny enough, we've done a Stellaris, custom Stellaris. We've done the custom division and sprint run Stellar, but we actually haven't had the original custom Stellar here to take a look at on the channel. So I really appreciate my friend sending this one in. It was an auction piece and he was able to snag it. So again, really appreciate that. But let's go ahead and take a look at this knife, since the Stellar for many people is kind of that Goldilocks size in between the F95 and the NeOn. First, we'll take a look at the specs of the knife. I won't really go over the size too much since I've done, 3 videos on Stellar size knives at the moment, but as you can see here, it is the same size, or in between the F95 and the F7 blade sizes. Of course, it is going to be very similar to the sprint run Stellar or custom division Stellar. What that means, of course, is that you're going to have a 3.75 inch blade length and an overall length of just, I want to say 8 1/4 inches. Let's see here, and we'll take a look at the closed hind length. And we're looking at just over 4.5 inches closed. Now for the weight here, let's take a look. Looking at 4.21 ounces, so a fair bit lighter than the F95, titanium F95. Now, of course, with all the customs, I like to start off with the coin, so let's go ahead and do that here. You can see that the coin has the name of the knife, the Stellar. The blade here is a smoky mirror finish M398. The handle is anodized titanium. It doesn't mention the backspacer here, which is done in Russian Tikron, which is kind of a Damascus or Mokutai analog. And we have the pivot system here, which is double row roller bearings. And this knife was finished in April of 2022, just before the show. You can see this is the new style coin with the very complex logo, custom pivot screws adorning the circumference of the coin. Also has kind of a very nice burnished finish on the coin. I wouldn't say it's really satin, but it's kind of polished and then tumbled, and kind of very, very nice finish here on the coin. Some of the other ones have had kind of a scratch sand finish that I didn't really like too much, but this one's really nice. Moving on to the knife, like the other, I want to see if I can clean that out. The smoky mirror finish is a little bit difficult to maintain. Of course, it's not going to show scratches as easily as a full mirror, but you do want to be careful. But anyways, the Stellar blade shape, this is the original Stellar blade shape with that extract cut that has a groove on the outline of the extract cut, which is really nice. Of course, we have satin flats like on many of Sergey's customs for the mono steel knives. That primary bevel here is done in that mirror, smoky mirror finish, which basically is the knife polished to a full mirror finish and then a light tumbling applied to it for, I want to say, just very little time, an hour at most. You can see here that the swedge, the long swedge that is characteristic of the Stellar blade shape, that has also been given the smoky mirror treatment, as well as all the faceting here on the blade spine, the jimping that's located near the stop pin, and also all the corners of the flipper tab. Really, really amazing work here. And the flipper tab just kind of sparkles with all of the chamfers in the correct lighting. I really love how Sergey takes the time to do that finishing here on the flipper tab. Now, one thing that I've noticed is that this blade stock is noticeably thinner than the Custom Division Stellar and the Sprint Run, of course, and also the Stellaris. I haven't taken calipers to any other full custom Stellars, but I do believe them to be thicker than this one right here. This one has been clocking in at 3¼ millimeters for the blade stock thickness. Now, for comparison, the Sprint Run Stellar is much closer to 3.5, and you can see here that it is something that you can notice if you line up the flipper tabs here. It's interesting because the workshop has been known to do knives in 3, 3.2, 2.8 millimeters, but 3¼ that's just over 3.2, enough to say that this wasn't a knife that was of that blade stock size, and that 0.3 millimeters of blade stock removal and finishing on 3.5 millimeter stock seems really unlikely to me. So it's very interesting because it really goes to show that the hardware is really made for the knife, and whether that be the stop pin, the backspacer thickness, the pins here that have to really align to make everything work, it really does kind of involve the dimensions of the blade, which is very interesting. And that finishing that you get by sand finishing the blade, there's a lot of stuff that's involved in making a knife, especially one to this degree of precision. So just kind of an interesting tidbit that I think makes this knife a little bit more special at being, having that fairly thin blade stock for sure rub knives. Of course, the production knives are a 4 millimeter blade stock thickness. Now, moving on to the handle here, you can see that we have the classic straight lines for the Stellar. This is something that's different on the Custom Division and Sprint Runs, which have this kind of crosshatch pattern on the rear portion of the handle for the Sprint Run and on the front portion for the Custom Division. It's kind of nice to have this simplistic straight line design here. Of course, this was the original design, since the full custom Stellars were the first Stellar models to have ever come out. You will notice here that we do have the newest kind of iteration of Sergey's pivot designs. Going back and taking a look at, say, an old knife such as my NeOn here, you can see we have the small pivot screw and it is flat all the way across. Now, newer customs had been getting the larger screws, but they were still flat. Now we have this kind of new generation kind of faceted pivot screws here. Something that we've seen on Dmitry Sinkovich's customs. Now Sergey's kind of doing his own take on that, and I think it comes out really nice. What used to be full satin finish on the flats of the screw here, as you can see here, now is just on the very top raised portion here. Really nice appearance and accent here on the screws. You will notice here on the milling as well, and something that most people don't notice is the Stellar milling isn't just these lines that go across horizontally. Well, in the shape of it, of course it is, but if you take a look really closely, you can see that there are a set of primary lines here that are much larger, and then in between those grooves here, we have ridges that are not quite as tall. And so if you take a look really closely, you can see just how it creates that complex line pattern. That's something that I noticed at the very beginning, was that it looked like lines, but they didn't quite look the same. We get a similar effect with the Hati. I don't have a Hati here to show you, but the milling in the waves of the Hati, there's kind of a primary set of waves, and then in between those primary lines, there's kind of these smaller ridges, which is very interesting, very nice kind of effect that you get at the end of it. Now, of course, like all Stellars, we have really nice gentle curvature on the chamfers on the top and the bottom of the handles. I really do like how the handle lines here on the top and the bottom of the kind of scalloped rear portion of the handle. I really like the shape here. I really can't explain it, but the lines match up quite well. Of course, we also have this slope on the back of the handle. A lot of people have reported that the Stellar really fits their hand very well, and I think this is probably a defining feature of why it fits so well in the hand. It falls off a lot quicker than it does on, say, an F95, for example. can see here we have a lanyard hole. This is one of the things I really didn't like too much about the Stellar design. The fact that we have a lanyard hole here is kind of doesn't really go with Sergey's design aesthetics. At least not what we've seen on many other knives, such as the F7 customs, the NeOns, the Hotties, which especially the knives that have a backspacer. The knives such as the original F95 design with a kind of standoff that precluded a kind of a lanyard hole integrated into the backspacer, that made sense. But to have a full hole here going through both the handle and the backspacer really, to me, doesn't make as much sense. A lot of people really like the fact that Shirogorov knives had a lanyard hole that wasn't that was fairly inconspicuous if you weren't using a lanyard. It really wasn't something that detracted from the overall handle design. But we've seen kind of a similar thing on the Russian Overkills with the lanyard hole here, but that was borrowed from RJ's design, so that kind of made more sense to me. But with no rear screw here on the show side, it kind of adds some balance, I guess, having the pivot here and then having some design element on the rear of the handle. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate here. Taking a look at the clip side, you can see here we have that faceted screw. Again, this is the actual screw, just like on all custom divisions and customs. Sorry, I actually didn't talk about the handle finishing here. The handle finishing here is a very dull gray, blue-ish color. It's a little bit difficult to describe, and I think my light box maybe is giving off more gray tones, but the knife does have a kind of a subtle slate blue, I would say, anodization here that has been given a pretty decent tumbling as well. It's not really super aggressive. You can't really see the media tumbling marks, but there is a degree of tumbling here that you can see up close, which I think it would make it for a very nice carry knife. Now, going here to the clip, really not too much to say about this clip that hasn't been said in all of my other videos for the Stellar design. I personally do not like the clip design for the Stellar. I don't like how this portion right here looks like a milled clip, and this portion right here looks like a bent clip. Of course, it is 100% milled, like all of Shirogorov's clips for the past couple years, almost a decade now, but more than a decade actually, since oh no, scratch that. Sorry. So the history of this clip actually comes from the what I think this clip design is a kind of an homage to the original kind of bent clips that Sergey's knives used to have. Some of the original F95s, definitely some of the Axis lock models had clips with a similar kind of shape and design curvature here. And I really think that the Stellar clip is kind of a reference to that design. But of course, it wouldn't really make sense to make a milled clip look like a kind of spring clip, although the Sigma does have something similar to that. So I feel like Sergey kind of added these elements here to kind of go along. But you see like the transition from this really nice rear portion with not only the very sudden curve, but also the kind of the angles here. I really think that the transition is quite sudden and doesn't really flow with the knife. Now, one other interesting about the clip, however, is you can see here there is no pattern here on the clip. Here you can see it's also smooth on the rear ramped portion. Now, you can see on the Sprint Run and also the Custom Division, we do have some kind of milling pattern here. We have kind of two thicknesses of the ridges here. Kind of have thin and then thick and then thin again. And this is something that Sergey does often on the customs, where you actually get a lack of milling compared to the Custom Division models. Now, a lot of people really like Shirogorov's milling, but personally for me, I really like when Sergey is doing this kind of contouring of titanium, that's just completely smooth, because it's just completely devoid of any, you know, milling marks from the CNC. And that takes some time to finish the titanium to that degree, to get rid of those marks, especially on these 3D areas. One example of this would be my NeOn here. I know you guys are still waiting on a review of this one, but you guys are gonna have to wait. But anyways, here, this NeOn is 3D contoured, but the handles here are just completely smooth. Now, people really love the silk milling. People say, well, you know, wouldn't this be so cool with the silk milling? But I honestly really like how Sergey has finished this titanium. It's pretty much completely clean. It has that very gentle sloping curve here. So that kind of lack of machining marks really, to me, is a bonus. And actually, one of my knife maker friends in Poland said that it's very easy to kind of hide any imperfections with the machining by milling in ridges here. So to see this kind of smoothness here, I think is a mark of perfection in the finishing of the knife. The rear screw, of course, is the duckfoot type. This one, I believe, is titanium, kind of anodized to just be dark. Very nice touch here. And another thing that I want to note is I really don't like how the screw is kind of in front of the lanyard hole. I actually don't know if it would be better behind either, but again, it kind of makes sense having the lanyard hole on this side here, but when you have the screw in the lanyard hole, I just think it's kind of awkward how kind of pushed up it is compared to other short grub knives where the rear screw is kind of the only thing that's in this area over here. Minor nitpick, but yeah, I just don't really understand the lanyard hole in this knife either. Now, this knife is a inset liner lock here. You can see that we have a steel lock, which means that this knife does not need a lock bar insert. And just like the other Stellar designs, it's a quite an intuitive design. Sergey calls this kind of the apron that protrudes off. I think it gives it a really nice touch and helps having this kind of little pop of steel here for the lock is a really nice design. It's not just a normal liner, kind of gives the lock itself a little bit of width here. Of course, you have very nice chamfering as well, and like all short grub knives, you can see that the handle relief cut here allows clearance for you to actually have very positive contact on the lock when disengaging it. Now, one other thing too, by design, I guess, because there is a liner, there is no kind of tab that hangs over the side that prevents the lock from traveling over. A lot of people really don't understand or like that most short grub knives, you have kind of this protrusion here from the lock bar insert to the lock bar, which means, now of course, this is here so that when the lock kind of hits this little, little protrusion here on the left side of the lock bar, that you'll know that it's time to send the knife in for service. But for the Stellar design, that's something that is just not included. So you could see that as a benefit for some people. You can see here the lock extends quite far into the frame up until right here. There are 2 screws that are securing it, and then there is also a post that is press fit into the lock that helps to index the inset lock here. With 3 points of contact and these screws having a very nice counter sunk milling to them, disassembling this knife, taking the lock out, putting everything back together, it's very repeatable in getting the lock aligned just perfect. You can see here that the backspacer, which again is Tikron, a Mokutai Timascus analog made in Russia, has very nice colors that pop out. The layers here are very nice yellows and light blues and dark blues. And like other Stellars, you can see that the backspacer kind of tapers. So you can see just this very thin line of of Tikron in the inside. Very nice effect here. Also on the handles, we have these tungsten rods. Now, some people are really split on this. I personally do like the tungsten rods. I think they kind of give kind of some nice visual flair, and they kind of set the knife apart from the, you know, the full customs from the custom division and sprint runs, and, you know, hopefully soon the production knives. But I can understand why some people don't like it. Dmitry Sienkiewicz has done something very similar on his knives, on many of his recent knives, so perhaps maybe he's taken a page from Dmitry's book here. These are 1.5 millimeter pins, so the same diameter as the normal roller bearings. We also have one pin here in the back that helps to serve as a guard, so that, you know, you don't, when you run your finger over here, you don't get snagged by the tip. This is something that is replaced just with a protrusion in the back spacer on on the sprint run and custom division. Also, you can see here that we have a little protrusion here on the front of the back spacer that is also missing on the sprint run and custom division. The back spacer pattern itself is really nice. I'm not sure if I talked about some previous videos, but you can see here that in between the grooves here, there's also some slight scalloping on both sides. So you can actually see through the back spacer. Now, this knife has double row roller bearings. It does have micro rollers, so unlike most knives which have 1.5 millimeter roller bearings, this knife has 1 millimeter roller bearings. They are also tungsten. There is steel washers, just like all of Sergey's customs, but this knife also does have the Foster bronze ring system. I'm not sure really what Sergey calls it, but it helps serve to kind of seal the pivot system from outside debris. As you can see here, if you take a look really closely, you can see the phosphor bronze kind of poking through the blade and the handle here. What this means is you get the benefits of a phosphor bronze washer that kind of seals debris, the action from the debris of you know, dirt, sand, stuff in your pocket. But on the inside, you still get that benefit of roller bearings. The phosphor bronze ring that, you know, surrounds the bearings cage is very thin, so it minimizes the amount of friction that it's causing on the blade and the handle. But it is fitted to the knife, so you get very hard contact, and that helps again to seal the bearings from the outside world. Really cool system. Kind of superseded by PLDS, I think, in terms of technology. PLDS doesn't offer that same kind of phosphor bronze pivot sealing technology that you get with this right here. I guess you could merge the two, but the PLDS kind of inside design would have to be, inside race would have to be quite large to house the rings and stuff. I guess it could be done with micro rollers, which is probably the reason why this knife was used here. But anyways, I digress. I personally really like having the phosphor bronze ring. I've never seen washers with that kind of technology, or sorry, bearings with that kind of technology. So I think it really gives it a leg up compared to, you know, other knife makers' bearing systems, those who do make their own bearings. But anyways, that's pretty much it for this knife. This one ran quite long, but I really wanted to do the Stellar justice since, again, you know, we've done pretty much every Stellar design, Stellar, you know, shaped knife besides the actual real custom Stellar. Hopefully we can do the production whenever that comes out. But anyways, hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time.